Good morning. And we're going to continue with the Four Temperaments. Now, because that other one did its own thing, I'm going to show you this the very last page so that you can see what was in the last part there. Oh, hang on with me there. There we go. So we got plan ahead and adapt as you go. Runs one life, let life happen. So I'm going to read that and then I'm going to go on with the Four Temperaments while we catch a late sunrise here because it had to fight its way through the clouds. Thank you for being with me this morning. Let's see. Thus far, the concept of type of preference on 4 dimensions of difference has been examined. Out of this Jungian theory have emerged 16 types. In order to use the typology to understand others and predict what they will do, one would have to become familiar with all 16. That is a tall order. The real usefulness of the types comes not in memorizing the 16 portraits, but in understanding the temperamental base of the types. There seem to be 4 temperaments, as indicated by Hippocrates centuries ago and by Spranger more recently. The next chapter will examine this view. All right, chapter 2, the 4 temperaments. Once again, as Riddick says, it looks clear. In our effort to describe the 4 temperaments of Hippocrates, the sanguine, choleric, phlegmatic, and melancholic, we can stitch together the useful theoretical contributions of Jung, Kretschmer, Freud, Adler, Sullivan, and Maslow, recognizing the insight of each at the same time that we keep them from canceling each other out. In taking our cue from Kretschmer in the temperament hypothesis, we must abandon Jung's idea of functions. But in giving up Jung's function, we must not abandon his behavior descriptions, for they have great predictive value. By knowing a person's type, we can anticipate rather accurately what he will do most of the time. This is not something to give up lightly, so it is not so much that the function type is abandoned, but rather subordinated to the concept of temperament, the latter having a much wider range of convenience as an explainer of behavior. What is meant, first of all, by temperament? This question is not as naive as it sounds, for American psychology has rarely considered the idea, and so is in no position to define it or pronounce its uses. Temperament can denote a moderation or unification of otherwise desperate forces, a tempering or concession of opposing influences, an overall coloration or tuning, a kind of thematization of the whole, a uniformity of the diverse. One's temperament is that which places a signature or thumbprint on each of one's actions, making it recognizably one's own. This consistency in action can be observed from a very early age, some features earlier than others, long before events have had time or occasion to imprint the person. It is tempting, therefore, to say that form is given, not acquired, and that temperament is the inborn form of the living being. Maslow, 1954, said that motives displace each other as a person grows up. We start, he said, with psychological needs. We learn to take it for granted that these needs will be fulfilled, and once fulfilled, are no longer motivating for us. We graduate to safety needs. Soon, these are taken for granted and are no longer motivating. So we ascend to social needs, to love and caring. Most people are able to arrange their lives to fulfill these needs as well, and so ascend to the need for esteem. That is the need to be well regarded by self and others. A few, not very many really, says Maslow, are able to accumulate enough esteem to take even it for granted, and so emerge finally at what he called the self-actualizing personality, no longer motivated by the lower physical needs or by needs for safety, love, and self-esteem. But Maslow implies those people who don't make it to the top have a latent or potential need for self-actualization, which would break forth as a full-blown motive once they overcome their fixations at lower levels. This hierarchical view of motivation is reminiscent of the Freudian stages of psychosexual development. Although desexualized, it also resembles a theory of motivation proposed by William Sheldon from 1936, some 14 years prior to Maslow's. In the light of Harlow's work with monkeys, it may be necessary to rearrange the order of needs a bit, such that the first need is social, the second is safety, and the third is physical. In any event, it makes sense to say that we do not continuously search for social ties or safety or food when they are continuously supplied and can be taken for granted most of the time. We turn our interest to the achievement of esteem, as Maslow argues. But beyond this point, we are wise to part company with Maslow. Not everybody is keen to actualize the self once liberated from the need for self-esteem. Not even most. Most people want something else entirely. Only the caloric are concerned with making the self real. It is not, then, that self-actualization is a step beyond self-esteem. Rather, it is a means to self-esteem. Those who are caloric, which is to say, who wish for self-actualization, like themselves better in the degree that they achieve their aim. Certainly all of us must have self-esteem. Maslow was right in this. But self-actualization, far from transcending self-esteem, must be relegated to the position of but one of many routes to self-esteem. There are other courses. For instance, Freud, from 1920, was right when he said pleasure is the way, but not for everybody, as he supposed, and not as an end in itself, but for self-esteem. Only the sanguine like themselves better when they live freely and spontaneously. Sullivan was also right. The security of social status is important for some, and in the service of self-regard. Those who are melancholic hold themselves in higher regard when they achieve position and belong to social units. Likewise, Adler was right in that the quest for powers moves us, some of us, so that phlegmatics look upon themselves with pride as their powers increase. The Hippocratic names for the four temperaments, however, are misleading. They derive from the four body fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, and so have arcane and limited reference. On the other hand, 4 Greek gods, all of whom Zeus commissioned to make man more like the gods, represent the temperaments quite accurately, albeit metaphorically. These are Apollo, Dionysus, Prometheus, and his brother Epimetheus. Myth has it that Apollo was commissioned to give man a sense of spirit, Dionysus to teach man joy, Prometheus to give man science, and Epimetheus to convey a sense of duty. It will clarify things to name the 4 temperaments after gods, because each god and each temperament has its followers. Who worships Apollo, spirit, does not worship Prometheus, science, and who desires Dionysian joy or release is not content with Epimethean duty. We see that the 4 temperaments are different from each other in very fundamental ways. Another corrective on Jungian typology is required. In the perspective of temperament theory, Jungian types emerge from temperaments by way of differentiation. Instead of being built up by way of combination of functions. Growth is by individuation, a separation or splitting, rather than integration, association, or concatenation. A person becomes an ENFJ or an INFP or whatever because of his given temperament, rather than because, for example, extroversion somehow combined with intuition. Thus, temperament theory replaces the principles of integration, always found in reductionist theories, with the principle of differentiation. Further, the Jungian typology must undergo some rearrangement to conform to these temperaments. What Jung called intuition, capital N, appears to be equivalent to Kretschmer's schizothymic temperament. The N's, or schizothymes, opt either for the Apollonian spirituality, which is self-actualization, or the Promethean science, which is powers. Sensation, capital S, seems equivalent to Kretschmer's cyclothymic temperament. The capital S's, or cycloids, choose either the Dionysian joy, freedom to act, or the Epimethean duty, which is social status. Note that Jung's feeling, which is a big capital F, now distinguishes the Apollonian self-actualization motive from the thinking, a big capital T, Promethean power motive. Also note that Jung's judgment, which is a capital J, distinguishes the Epimethean duty motive from the Dionysian freedom motive, which is a capital P. This next paragraph is very similar to that last one, so bear with me, please. And then we'll quit on this, and I'll start the next one on Dionysian temperament. All right, continuing with this last section of this part. Spranger's views on character or temperament, contemporary with Jung's, are very useful, for he spoke of values rather than function. In his book, Types of Men, from 1928, he named 4 values which distinguish one type from another: aesthetic, economic, theoretical, and religious. The other two values he named, social and political, pertained to all, and hence were not distinguishing. Careful reading of this extremely complicated work reveals a rather clear correspondence with the Jungian typology as follows. The capital N and capital F values religiosity, which is ethics. The NT values the theoretical, which is science. The SP values the aesthetic, which is artistry. And the SJ values the economic, which is commerce. Temperament or character theory was in the air of Europe at century's turn. The other characterologists surely affected Jung, Kretschmer, and Spranger. The similarities of these many views on character are hard to overlook. Adekes, 1907, Apfelbach, 1924, Levy, 1896, Sternberg, 1907, Boulios, 1901. 8 types especially bear close resemblance to Jung's. Very simply, very simply, temperament determines behavior because behavior is the instrument for getting us what we must have, satisfying our desire for that one thing we live for. The God or temperament we were born to has left each of us a hunger that must be fed daily. Sisyphus was punished by Zeus so that he had to push an enormous rock to the top of a mountain, only to have it roll to the bottom while he rested. In a sense, we are all Sisyphus. Today we satisfy our hunger for powers or status or freedom or meaning, whatever our temperament dictates. But find tomorrow, we must do it over again. Yesterday's achievement will not do. I'll continue. We are currently on page 30 from the book Please Understand Me, Character and Temperament Types by David Kiersey and Marilyn Bates. The next part's going to be the Dionysian temperament. And we'll see how far we can get together. Thank you for being with me. I appreciate you.